Thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. I am Chef Julia from the UCLA Teaching Kitchen. We have Amy here, who is an amazing registered dietitian that works at UCLA with us. And we are going to be bringing you a really fun, healthy weeknight dinner today for lunch. Actually, it's a great lunch too. You could eat this any time of day. It would be really delicious, but it's a really quick go-to, a really nice dinner to make during the week. It's also really helpful. Got a lot of veggies in it, got a lot of different things that you can use in other meals. So if you're prepping the veggies for this stir fry, you could always prep extra, and then it could go into other dishes like a soup, like roasted veggies, or even just a Buddha bowl, make some salads for yourself, things like that. So it helps in that sense to think about, like, if you're shopping for snap peas, carrots, and asparagus for this stir fry, then you're going to be able to use those in a lot of other really healthy, delicious dishes throughout the week. So it's great for that. It's also one of my favorite things to throw together. I love sort of Americanized Asian food. This is definitely in that category. It's teriyaki, but we've reduced the sugar by more than half compared to your normal teriyaki that you get at restaurants, or the bottled sauces you can find on the shelf. So super important. You want to serve this with a whole grain like a brown rice or farro or something like that. That would take this dinner up to the next level. I like it just with the chicken and the veggies too, especially if you're having it like as a light lunch or something. You don't necessarily need the whole thing, but it really goes really great with especially brown rice. That nutty flavor goes really well with the teriyaki sauce stuff. These ingredients are also really helpful to just have in your pantry. They go with a lot of different things. A lot of recipes out there on the internet, in the world, in cookbooks, call for things like soy sauce, sesame oil, brown sugar, ginger powder. These are pretty generic pantry staples. So building from this recipe, you can actually then create a lot of other really fun recipes.
I really like this too, because you can, if you have a bigger group of people, you can just add more of the ingredients, right? Or you can also split it up and have lunch. You know, a lot of us are eating lunch at home now, but if you are bringing lunch to work or in the future, you can put it in 5 different Tupperware containers and have lunch for the week.
Yes, this is a perfect meal prep option. It lasts for 4 or 5 days. The veggies will still be delicious. So yeah, you just break it up into your Tupperwares. It's really great for that. And yeah, perfect point about bulking it up. You can't really go wrong by adding even more extra veggies to this. If you wanted to make it shrimp instead, if you wanted to just leave out the protein, or maybe use alternate like tofu, really, really great option. Or just any veggies that you have in your fridge will pretty much work in a stir fry. So it's really versatile. It's really yummy, and
it's a great way to use up vegetables that are sitting there in your refrigerator, and you're like, what do I do with these? Throw them in the stir fry.
Totally. Today my carrots are maybe just under crisp. You know, they're a little bit on the less crispy side. Same with my broccoli. It could have been roasted maybe a day or two ago, but it's going to be perfect in this. We want it to be just about half crispy anyway for a stir fry. And that's something that I'm going to point out. I like my veggies in a stir fry, not soggy, not like cooked all the way through. I like just that little bit of maybe an al dente thing going on to your veggies, so they still taste really fresh and wonderful. If you like your veggies really, 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 really cooked, then you just cook it a little bit longer. Personal preference is the whole game when it comes to cooking. You want to make things that you like so that you're going to want to eat it more often, especially things with a lot of veggies in it. First thing that you do whenever you're cooking from a recipe, even if you're just going to be using the recipe as a general guideline, which is very common when it comes to cooking, you want to read the entire thing all the way through. You might find something in like the later notes that you realize you don't have that piece of equipment, or you don't want to put that in, or you need to make a slight adjustment. And knowing that before you get everything all hot and bothered is really important. So you want to make sure that you read this all the way through. I know that we don't need the oven for this recipe, so there's no preheating. Awesome as we get close to summer, and I don't know about you, but my little apartment gets pretty hot when I get that oven going. So anything I can make on the stovetop for dinner that still feels really comforting and hearty, it's a really fun recipe for me. And as few dishes as possible. As Amy knows, we've worked together a lot. I really like things that I can minimize the amount of dishes I have to do. This small apartment doesn't have a dishwasher, so we've got one skillet, we've got one pot for our sauce. and I've got a cutting board and a couple of plates. Like, that's it. It's not going to be a very, very heavy dish load, which is also a really big selling point when it comes to recipes. So read everything through, get a general layout of what you're doing. This recipe, it starts off by cooking the chicken, which assumes that you've already finished dicing the chicken, because in the ingredients list off to the side, it says chicken breast diced. So if a recipe tells you like how the prep should be done, then it assumes you've already done it by the time it tells you to start cooking. Otherwise, it will just tell you chicken breast, and then in the instructions, it will tell you dice the chicken breast. So some recipes are different. You want to really make sure that you've got a good understanding of what it's asking you to do. I haven't finished cutting all of the chicken because I wanted to be able to demonstrate some of that to you. So we're going to do a little bit out of order of this kind of stuff. Also, you run out of space pretty quickly, countertop-wise in certain kitchens. And so I want to get the sauce stuff kind of mixed together and out of the way, because it's taking up a lot of space on my counter, and I just kind of want to get that done. I've also read through, and I noticed that we're going to be mixing all of the sauce ingredients together in a small pot and then heating it up. Doesn't matter if I mix it in the pot now or later, as long as I wait to heat it up until I'm ready to do so. So I'm going to just mix everything in the pot, and then I can kind of set aside back here way out of my way, and all of these other things can get out of the way. So I'm going to mix the sauce, leaving the cornstarch mixture aside. I'll talk you through that as we get to it. And then we're going to finish our prep, veggies and chicken, and then we're going to get to cooking. Because once we start cooking, this is not like a, oh, you can kind of walk away and keep cutting your carrots. You're going to start cooking and you're going to finish cooking very quickly. So you kind of have to have everything really ready to go. It's called your mise en place. It's the restaurant cooking term for having everything already prepped out, everything in its place, mise en place. So we want to get all of our mise ready. So we're going to do our sauce, then finish our prep so I can give you a little knife demo, and then we're going to just cook, and then you're going to get to eat some tasty lunch. If anybody does have any questions about what I'm doing, type it into the chat box, and Amy will help proctor some of those questions as they pop up. If the questions can wait until the end, then we'll do a little bit of a chat towards the end. Hopefully this doesn't take the whole time if I get going now. So I've got my little pot here, and my sauce ingredients are conveniently separated down below at the bottom of the page, so that makes it even easier. I'm going to go through these ingredients, and I think Amy will probably have some helpful things to say about some of them. I've got water, not very important, but there you go. I mean, how important is water? But water. Low sodium soy sauce. We have a half a cup of that.
And we like to encourage low sodium just because soy sauce is so high in sodium. There's about 335 milligrams in a teaspoon. So a whole tablespoon has about 1,000 milligrams of sodium. So by choosing the low, you get about 40% less sodium.
That is a huge difference.
And also, if you're intolerant of gluten, you want to probably use something like tamari, which not all of them are gluten-free, but most of them are. Just look at the label.
It'll say on the label, yeah. There's also, what is it, coconut aminos?
Coconut aminos, too, are another choice that you could definitely use. Soy sauce is high in, I'm not even going to probably pronounce this right, but shoyu flavonoids, which are a type of flavonoid that we're going to talk about flavonoids in a little bit, too. But it's an antioxidant, which may help to reduce inflammation. So it's got some good properties. It's also antimicrobial. So it may protect the body from certain bacteria like streptococcus and salmonella.
Very
so it's
important.
More than just a bundle of salt. It actually has a really great flavor too.
Oh,
and
God.
some good characteristics.
Yeah. I want to quickly point out, this is 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. We do have a little bit of sugar in this recipe, but compared to normal teriyaki, like I said, it's far, far less. Brown sugar, better than your like bleached white processed white sugar. I'm packing it down, but it is just 1 level tablespoon. It's not a heaping, mounded tablespoon. You want it to be very level so that you're not adding additional sugar to the recipe. Very careful measurement. And the same with the honey. It's just 1 tablespoon of each, the brown sugar and the honey. And so just full, not like overflowing. You want it to just be 1 tablespoon. That's pretty important to keep that measurement exact. We all know that honey is sticky. It's its best property. It's going to just want to stick to that spoon. Your hand is your best tool in the kitchen. Make sure that you wash them well before starting, but go ahead and scrape it off. You want to make sure that you're getting all of that good honey off of that spoon and into your pot. Setting that aside, soy sauce, water, brown sugar, honey. And then we're going to be doing some seasonings here about ground ginger and garlic powder. You can absolutely use the fresh stuff if you have fresh ginger and fresh garlic. You could just grate them like on a microplane or on a really, really fine grater, or use a garlic press for the garlic, because you want it extremely broken down, not in little chunks for this. The thing about powder versus fresh, there is like a condensing that happens with the flavor into its powdered form. So we're using a half a teaspoon of each of these. You would use of fresh, just a tiny bit less. Just you can just adjust that. But again, I happen to think that powdered ginger and fresh ginger have a little bit different flavor. Fresh ginger tastes a little bit more spicy to me. So you can always just use the same ingredient quantity, like a half a teaspoon. You're just going to get a little bit of a different ginger quality than you would with the other, but it's not going to hurt it either way. You might just like lessen your amount by like a scotch, a teeny tiny bit less than a half a teaspoon. Making sure that I'm using the right one. Half a teaspoon of garlic powder, and then a half a teaspoon of the ginger powder. And again, you want to use a pretty level measurement of that. You can use the side of the jar or the lid. I try to use, you see this here? I try to use the lid to kind of level off that spoon, scrape it back into the jar so that I don't have a big old heaping mound of that, because that would be more than what is called for, which definitely will change the flavor of your sauce.
And both of these spices are known for their anti-inflammatory properties. So they're definitely healthy in addition to adding great flavor. They've been used throughout history really for even medicinal properties. Ginger is often used as a digestive aid to help with nausea and stomach upset. The National Cancer Institute recognizes garlic as having potential anti-cancer properties. And so great way to spice up your food, but also add some special anti-inflammatory ingredients there.
Yeah. And then we put in our sesame oil. That was just 1 teaspoon. It's got an incredibly strong, pungent aroma and flavor. It goes a long way in terms of flavoring your dish. And it's a little bit higher in like some of the fats, right, Amy? So we want to use a little bit less of it. Plus, you don't need that much of it because of the flavor is so strong. And I'm using sambal as my hot sauce. If you have sriracha, that's fine.
So all fats have about the same amount of fat?
Oh, yeah, fat. I think, am I freezing?
Oh, yeah. So like a tablespoon of oil. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can now.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. My internet, I just got a message, it's unstable. We have several Zoom meetings going on in my house at the same time. But so 1 tablespoon of fat has about 120 grams or 120 calories, regardless of the type of fat it is. But the various, monounsaturated versus saturated fat will vary depending on what type of oil you're choosing. Sesame oil is actually pretty high in the mono and polyunsaturated fats, so that's good. It's actually pretty low in the saturated fats.
Great.
It's also rich in antioxidants. And one study I came across that was published in the American Journal of Collegiate Nutrition, it's a small study with only 46 subjects that had type 2 diabetes, and they found that those taking sesame oil for 90 days significantly reduced their fasting blood sugar and hemoglobin A1C levels compared to people who were getting a placebo. So I'm not exactly sure. They might have been getting, I think it was like 5 tablespoons of sesame oil, which is probably more calories than most of us can afford to spend on oil. That would be like 600 or more calories. But nonetheless, possibly a benefit to your blood sugar levels.
Yeah, that's really good to know because it is such a delicious flavor. It goes a long way in your food. You don't need much. That 1 teaspoon that we put in is going to really be really aromatic and add a lot of depth to this sauce. I added 1 teaspoon of that sambal, which is a chili garlic paste. You can use, like I said, a sriracha or other hot sauces would work. Just because the You can also use like red pepper flakes. That would work. If you don't like spicy, don't put it in there. This is definitely a preference level. I like that kick. I'll probably even put more hot sauce on at the end. But this gives it, you want to kind of find that balance when you're making sauces, especially of acid, salt, sugar, heat. Like those things are actually, that's what gives you a really well-balanced flavor of anything that you're cooking. So adding a little bit of a spice, a little bit of a sweet, a little of that salty, and then we've got some do you have any acid in this? Well, I guess from the chili paste a little bit, yeah. And the ginger and garlic add a little bit of a spice, but you could definitely add lemon, and that would really help even kind of balance it out, and it would add a lot of good nutrient too. That would be, or lime would be a nice addition to the sauce. If you wanted, you could squeeze it over the top at the end. Pretty basic, but that's the sauce. It's in the pot. It's ready to go. We want to have that ready to heat up later, but just so that it's out of the way for now. I have my cornstarch mixture already made, 1 tablespoon cornstarch to 1 tablespoon water. That is what we call a cornstarch slurry, and that is a regular mixture and ratio for anything when you want to thicken a sauce with a cornstarch slurry. It's a 1-to-1 cornstarch water, and that you can thicken pretty much any sauce that way if you want. That's how you get that kind of nice shine to a sauce as well. So we are going to be using that, but you don't mix that in until the very, very end as it starts to heat up and it'll get thick. So like I said, we're going to be moving into.
One thing I wanted to add real quick about the sambal.
Yeah.
Sambal and sriracha are very similar, except that sambal has no sugar. So if you have both, you might want to try the sambal if you're worried about sugar, even though the amount in sriracha is not a lot. There's 1 gram in a teaspoon, right? And we're not using a lot. But if you are crazy, like crazy hot food and you're using a lot of it, then it might make a difference. So the sambal would be a little bit less sugar. There's no sugar in it, actually.
Really good to know. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to show you my veggies. I've got most of them cut up here. Broccoli are just in little basic florets. You can just chop it off the end of the broccoli stalk and break it up with your hands into florets. I've got asparagus just cut into about 2-inch long pieces. Literally, I just cut off the rough end and then cut the stalks into 2-inch pieces. I'm going to show you the carrot. It is as simple as cutting it into what we call coins. I don't really peel carrots. I get these from the farmer's market. I know that they're very good. The peel has a lot of the nutrition in it from what I have learned. Plus, I scrub them with a veggie brush really, really well under cold running water, and that removes any of the dirt and impurities. And so I don't want to peel off any more of the nutritional value than I have to. So I usually just scrub my veggies really well, depending, unless it's a peel that just is not very fun to eat, like certain squash. And I'm going to cut them, the recipe says to cut them into coins. I'm going to cut them on kind of a bias, like a diagonal coin, just because it's more visually appealing. And when you make your healthy food visually appealing, you want to eat it more often. Holding the knife as close to the blade as possible, so I've got a really good solid grip on it. If I was back here, it would be really unsafe and wobbly. You want a sturdy grip on the knife, and then you want your other hand always to be in that claw, so that your first knuckle and your fingertips are nice and safe and tucked back. And you can also use that hand as we call it a guide hand, so you can hold your food with it. And you can also guide yourself in terms of how big of a cut you want to make. So I use my hand to tell me like how thick of a coin I want, and I slide, keeping the tip of the knife on the cutting board whenever possible. And you slide your knife up and down rather than chopping up and down. That ruins your blade and you have a higher chance of cutting yourself if you do that. So very carefully sliding the blade up and down, just bringing it down in a nice guillotine chop. I've got my nice pretty slanted carrot coins. So that's carrots. The others were pretty simple. The snap peas I want to show you because a lot of people get these pre-prepped at the market, and that's perfectly acceptable. Get them in a little bag. Make sure that it says that they've been trimmed already. If they haven't been trimmed, then you just go to eat them. You get that really unpleasant string. And a lot of people don't realize that the string can continue on both sides of the pea. So you want to take your paring knife. You can even just do this with your fingers, but I like using a knife. And cut just the corner, and then peel that string all the way down. Leaving it attached, I then cut the other tip off, and peel that side all the way down. You notice how there were strings on both sides? It can be very thick and it can get stuck in your teeth, and it's just really unpleasant to eat that. So you want to always remember to check to make sure that's been removed from your snap peas or snow peas. Any of those kind have that kind of a thing happening. And then you just cut it in half on a nice little diagonal. I'll do this one to show you again, quick. One side and then down the other side to get both sides of that string. A nice slice in half. That string is real tough on both sides, so you want to be really aware that they have been trimmed for you properly if you buy them ready to go. And if not, now you know how to do it. Bell pepper. A lot of people ask how to cut bell pepper. There's a couple different ways. If you know that you're not going to use the whole thing, which I am not, I really like to leave that core and stem intact. It actually maintains the structure, keeping the rest of the bell pepper fresher for longer in my fridge. So I just cut off what I need. I'm only going to use about one of the side walls. So starting right at the stem, I just cut down and around the center, leaving that completely intact, and all I have is the side of the bell pepper that I want to use. That's all I'm going to be using for this because I have so many other veggies. You can use a whole bell pepper, just follow the same protocol, cutting all the way around the sides. And then once you have this, we call this a plank. From anything, this is how you dice. You find your plank, you cut your plank into long strips, which we call baton, which is French for stick. And then you cut your sticks into little squares. So you've got this long strip, you turn that around, and you chop downward, and that's how you dice. That's how you dice anything, even if it's shaped a little bit differently than a bell pepper. You get your plank, you get your sticks, you get your dice. Okay, so I've got most of my veggies here chopped up and ready to go. So I'm going to finish with the chicken, and I saved that for last because it's going to make my cutting board really gross and raw and chickeny and unhealthy and unsafe, and I would not have been able to then cut my veggies on it. Even though we are going to be cooking the veggies, that is just, you don't do that kind of cross-contamination. You would have had to have cleaned the cutting board or swapped it out for a new board. And so to save that trouble, I'm doing the chicken last because then we're going to be done with the cutting board. Okay. Oh, wait, no. I want to do the scallions first. For that reason, so that we have a nice clean cutting board to cut them. The scallions we're going to be using as a garnish. It's just to go on at the end, but I want to have them done so that we are done with our cutting board completely. I'm just going to be using a couple here. Scallions are great. If you don't use the whole bunch, you leave that little root hairy end attached. Don't ever cut that off. You can just plant that in a cup full of water, and they will regrow. This was my last bunch of scallions, put in a lovely vase, because no one buys me flowers. And this has regrown from cut down to like a 2-inch mark. They're all regrowing by themselves. So you hardly ever have to buy scallions again. Just don't ever throw away that hairy root end. They're gonna keep growing for you, which is really awesome. Just aside, I'm just gonna cut a couple of them up as a garnish. Like I said, we wanna add some fresh chopped up green flavor on at the end, and onion is a really nice flavor to mix into this. We didn't have any onion going into the stir fry, so this is going to add a lot of that really good fresh flavor at the end. I'm just going to cut them straight across, make some nice little chopped scallions here, so it'll look really pretty for your final dish. A lot of my friends and people that I teach and work with a lot, they say, oh, you know, I just threw it into a bowl, it's just me. And that makes me really, really sad because you are the most important person that you can be cooking for. And I don't know if you watch Parks and Rec, but you should treat yourself. Every meal, make it beautiful, make it fun, make it delicious. You deserve that just as much as anybody else does. So I'm going to set these scallions aside so that we can use them to make
some of the things that we add on just for, you know, we might think of as decorations or a little seasoning, actually can add a lot of nutrition to what we're eating. So scallions are really, you know, they have some vitamin K, some vitamin A, but even like a lot of the herbs that Julia cooks with often have a lot of really great characteristics that we just kind of maybe think are adding some flavor to the food, but they're actually boosting our nutrition quite a bit too.
Yeah, we've got sesame seeds going on top of this, and it says just for garnish, but sesame seeds they add so much to your dish in terms of nutritional value, right?
Yeah, they've got some protein, some fiber, some calcium, some iron, um, magnesium, right? So a lot of those things are important for bone health, blood pressure regulation. Um, yeah,
So
so
cool.
great additions.
All right.
Yeah, sesame seeds are also actually a good source of nutrients for our immune system because they contain zinc and selenium and copper and iron. And I know we all want to have very strong immune systems right now.
Yes. Yeah, especially right now. I've got one of my chicken breasts cut up. So I bought a pack of 2 chicken breasts and it measured out to 1.47 pounds total, which was pretty much perfect. The recipe says about 1.5 pounds of chicken. That's usually about 2 large chicken breasts. They've already been mostly cleaned, the boneless, skinless, but there's always a bit of like cartilage or fat left around, especially around where the joint was. You want to trim that off now. If you cook it up and then bite into that, we all know how unpleasant it is trying to chew through like a piece of tendon or something. So go ahead and just trim all that off, and especially if it's any of the tougher cartilage bits, sometimes the chicken factory doesn't get it all, so you got to make sure you are paying attention and making it as clean, especially removing as much of the fat as possible, any of those last little bits, and then you just dice it. We're going with a large dice today. If we dice the whole thing straight across, this side would be much fatter dice than this side. Everybody, I think we all know there's a thinner, like tail end to chicken breast. So I just cut that off, the piece that is the thinnest piece. That just gets straight diced, which I've got my plank, then I cut it into my sticks. I turn my sticks around, and I cut those into my dices. Even if it's a large dice, it's still the same method. Now this piece of breast was much fatter. It's almost twice the thickness as the tail end. So I'm actually going to cut it in half. I'm going to cut it in half horizontally by carefully using my guide hand flatly across the top to hold it gently. And then I'm just dragging my knife through horizontally straight across the length of your cutting board to get 2 chicken breasts, which are now the same width as what you already cut. So that's how you can get your chicken to be the same thickness throughout. This is a really good technique to do if you're doing any kind of chicken and you want it to be cut into the same size. Try to create the same thickness first and then cut it down into the same size chunk. Okay, so
It also cooks faster in these smaller pieces.
Yes, excellent. I was definitely going to make that point. I am all about things that cook faster and things that are easier to eat. I like cooking my food in a one-bite method because then it's ready to go. Plus, it will cook a whole lot faster. Those thin coins of carrot that we cut are going to take no time at all, right? So when you're roasting vegetables, if you're prepping things for cooking, the smaller you cut them, the faster they're going to take, no matter how you're doing it. I'm moving this aside so that I don't make any mistakes of cross-contaminating and using those dirty items for anything else in this process, because they are covered in raw chicken and that would be incredibly unsafe. So I've got my chicken. We've got our veggies. We've got our garnish. We've got our sauce. We are now in cooking mode. So I'm going to, I know this is super fancy technology. One second. I'm going to put this box on top of this other box. And I think you guys will be able to see a little bit better here into the action zone. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to be here for the rest of the time. We've got about half an hour left. This won't take that entire time to cook it. This is the fun part. It's kind of once we get going, we're just going to be done here. We are going to start with the chicken. We're going to set that aside on a plate, so you want to have a plate or some kind of vessel ready to put that onto. And then we're going to do the veggies, and then the chicken's going to get mixed into it all, and that is going to be finished we're going to be done here in about 15 minutes, I think, and then we'll be able to talk about some stuff. We need questions answered. You see I'm using a cast iron skillet. I use cast iron skillets.
So Julia, there is a question.
Okay. I think that my internet is also going in and out. I'm sorry.
Someone's wondering why you wear gloves.
I only do when I'm working with the raw chicken so that I don't have to stop and waste the time to then continue washing my hands over and over again. I washed them before we started, and I kind of, just because of the flow of the class, if I had to stop to wash my hands, and it just is a little bit awkward in the middle of class. So the gloves help just for the raw chicken. I don't worry about that normally because I'm only cooking for myself here. If I were to be serving other people and it were ready-made food, then I would have to wear gloves. That's the law. But yeah, it's just because it's raw chicken and I didn't want to have to stop to wash my hands a bunch of times. That's all. So the cast iron skillet, I use for almost all of my cooking, unless I need something to be very specifically cooked in a nonstick pan. But I love the versatility of a cast iron. It's heavy duty. It can go from stovetop to oven. It conducts the heat really, really well. Once it gets hot, it stays hot and it heats throughout the pan. Not like some pans are a different kind of metal on the bottom than they are on the sides. That's actually going to heat differently. You're going to have a hotter bottom than you will the sides or vice versa. So having this kind of a pan is actually I recommend having a good cast iron skillet and then one good nonstick pan. Those are the skillets that I use more than anything else. Fancy omelet pans.
It also imparts some iron.
Yes.
Impart some iron to your food also.
Yeah, you can't really go wrong with adding a little bit of extra nutrients. So we're going to heat the pan first. Whenever you're sauteing anything, you think about the ha-ha method, which is silly and you'll never forget it because, so you heat the pan and then you heat the oil, you add the oil, heat the oil, add the food. So your ha-ha, the situation, that's how you saute anything. If you were to put your oil into a cold pan, it would take a really long time waiting for the process to heat up. If you put your food into cold oil, you would it would be really gross. You have like oil steamed food. So you heat your pan up. Once it's getting warm, then you can add your oil or fat or whatever you might be using. It's just about a teaspoon. And then, because we're just doing the chicken, then we're going to add a little bit more when we do our veggies. You want to spread it out, but you see I'm not going to throw the chicken right in right away. I want to make sure that that oil gets hot first, and then we're going to add the chicken. So this is the ha-ha process. Heat, add. And that's how you can like ensure you're going to get a good sear when you first start to saute whatever it is that you're sauteing. You can tell when the oil is hot when it starts to get kind of wispy. It pulls away from the center. It gets like little cloudy lines in it, these like little wisps. Then it's hot enough. You can also take a tiny drop of water on your finger and maybe splash it into the oil, but do that from very far away. Don't hurt yourself. It will splatter if it's hot oil. So it's just, you get a good idea of what it looks like when the oil kind of pulls away from itself to the sides of the pan, and it's good to go. I'm going to be adding this chicken all in one dump. I'm going to be adding salt and pepper, and then I want to lay it out into a single layer so that the surface area gets as much contact as possible, and it gets a really good kind of caramelization on the outside of the chicken.
Canola oil is one of those monounsaturated fats, high in monounsaturated fats, and it also is very neutral in flavor. So sometimes it's preferable than, say, using olive oil, just because if you don't want that flavor, canola is much more neutral.
Exactly why we're using that here today. Olive oil is amazing and delicious and great, but it has a really particular taste, which I don't think, I mean, it's fine. You could definitely use it if that's what you have. It's not going to ruin your dish at all. It just adds a different kind of a taste to it. So you notice that I'm not really messing around with this too much. I want to get some of these chunks that are sitting on top down onto the surface, but that chicken which has already made contact, I want to leave it there. I want it to really sear hard. And the more I move it right now, it's going to release before it creates a caramelized like surface. So I know it's sort of like counterintuitive. You want really badly to stir it right now, like stir it. Oh my God, why isn't she stirring it? That's how we're gonna get our really nice, good browning color on the chicken. The more you stir it, the grayer that it's gonna kind of be. You don't get that really good caramelized effect. So,
I think this is the biggest lesson I've learned from you, Julia. I'm such a stirrer, and now I'm like, why does my meat always look so white and unappetizing? Now I know you gotta let it sit.
Caramelizing. You really, really want to let. So right now I'm playing around between a medium and a medium-high heat. I don't ever want it at super rip roaring high, but and low would be far too low. We would get steamed meat. But I'm kind of going back and forth between a medium high and a medium, adjusting as the oil gets hotter and hotter. And now that I can see that it's cooking up the sides of the chicken and I'm getting some opaqueness coming through, I'm going to stir it. So I've got a really good golden brown color. I hope you can see that. Let me see if I can get closer. Kind of a honey golden brown on the surface there, which is nice. It wouldn't have done that if we had stirred it too much. But now I want to make sure that it's all broken up. I added about a half a teaspoon of salt, and then it was maybe a little bit less of that of pepper because pepper is not necessarily my bag as much as it is other people's. Black pepper is a personal thing. If you like black pepper, I'm not going to stop you. Go to town on your black pepper. It can't really add anything bad to your food. It's just going to change the flavor of your food. But if you like that flavor, then, you know, have at it. I think it helps enhance a little bit, but I don't want it to taste like black pepper chicken. Once you've got this pretty much where the surface area is cooked, we're not entirely concerned about it cooking all the way through yet because we're going to be adding it back into our stir fry. We just wanted to get kind of a hard caramelized sear on the surface area. So if you can kind of adjust them so that you're flipping them over to the other side that they've already been on. But don't stress, just stir it around. Make sure you're getting some color on one or both sides. And then when it seems like it's not going to caramelize much more on any of the surfaces, then we're going to set it aside to a pan. And then we're going to put our veggies in the same pan and get that all going and cooked up. I've got a plate here. I'm just going to let this finish searing for maybe another 25 seconds.
So when it comes to protein, obviously it's great for repair and building and very important to even our immune health. But one other thing that it helps with is blood sugar control to some extent. Because it helps to slow how quickly we absorb our food, it actually can lessen the effect of carbohydrates in the diet. So it's really great to have some protein with your meals. Usually we suggest people try to get about 20 grams at each meal, which is probably about what this is going to be, about 3 ounces or so. And, you know, as far as choices, it doesn't have to be meat in your meals. It could be beans, legumes, quinoa. It could be yogurt, eggs. Obviously, the beans and legumes are going to have some carbohydrates too, but they also contain fiber. So any of those would be great choices. And in addition to helping reduce blood sugar spikes, protein also aids in satiation. So it kind of carries us. It makes us feel satisfied for longer periods of time, which might help with weight control.
Definitely. I mean, it does for me. I feel like when I eat more protein in the morning to start my day, I eat less throughout the day than when I don't. It's a noticeable difference for me, but I think that that's, you know, my metabolism is very different than everybody else's, just as everybody else's is different from mine.
Yep. I think the more we can keep our blood sugar levels stable, though, the more kind of satisfied we feel, for sure. And protein and fiber are 2 things that help to do that.
Yeah.
And this dish is really high in fiber, too, thanks to all those great vegetables.
I love it. Yeah, even if you don't use a grain on the side, like we were saying, you can really still get plenty of fiber in this dish. I'm not going to mess around with this pan. I kind of want that chicken juice and things that are still, that's flavor, that's love. We're going to leave that in there. As long as it doesn't burn in your pan, then you don't need to do anything. If you got the heat a little high, sometimes that happens, and you just maybe wipe it out with a wet paper towel or something, grab a pair of tongs, and just kind of wipe it down a little bit. But the more of the residual flavor that's still in there, the better. I'm just gonna use about a teaspoon of canola oil to make sure that there's enough for our veggies not to burn. I'm going to make sure that spreads out pretty well, mixes in with any of the juices that were still in there. I'm right at medium high, so I'm about 2/3 of the way up the dial. My thing just goes from low to high, so it's all an estimation, but there you go. The way that we have cut these veggies, they can all go in there at the same time. They have pretty much very similar water content in them. The carrots might want to cook a little bit longer than everything else, but like I said, I like a little bit of a crunch to the carrots and some of this stuff in the veg anyway. If you had a vegetable that was like extremely high in fiber or far, far less of a water content, like a sweet potato, let's say, that would need to cook a lot longer than all of these. These will cook through the middle quicker because of how much water they have inside of them. The water gets hot, it helps cook the process faster. So all of these can go in at the same time. If you had cut the carrots into really big chunks, then they would need to go in first. That's why we cut them nice and thin into coins, so they'll cook pretty much at the same time as all these other veggies. I'm gonna just go right into our nice hot pan. If you don't hear that sizzle when you put your food into a saute pan and you haven't ha-ha'd correctly, I can't do that with a straight face. I had an actual professional chef teach us that in culinary school, you know, ha-ha your pan, and we all would just laugh. But it's a lesson.
All the colors in there, right? A lot of color means a lot of different flavonoids. And flavonoids are phytochemicals or plant chemicals that give fruits and vegetables their color. And so when you got a lot of different colors, that means there's a lot of different flavonoids. Flavonoids are powerful antioxidants and anti-inflammatories. And so super important for our bodies. They're associated with a decreased risk of chronic disease, although we're not really sure diets high in flavonoids are. So we don't know if it's actually the flavonoids or if there's other compounds in these foods that are important, but we do know that fruits and vegetables are definitely good for us.
That's awesome. Yeah. The recipe says bell pepper any color. I could only find green at the farmer's market this week because they're still coming in the season. They haven't turned orange and red yet, but at the market, whatever is usually red is the most expensive. So I honestly say, like, if you're cooking on a budget, then bell pepper is something that you can really make a difference in terms of buying the green versus buying the red. You can sometimes save like almost $1 on, per pound or whatever you're buying. But if you're just buying like one bell pepper, like it kind of doesn't really make that much of a price difference depending on the poundage, of the bell pepper that you're getting. So the more colorful, like Amy's saying, the more colorful your stir fry is, if you add in some red or yellow bell pepper, or even some different color carrots, those add different kinds of, it also, again, back to just making your food more visually appealing. Whatever makes you feel like, oh, that is pretty. I can't wait to eat that. That's how we want you to feel about your food, especially when you're cooking it for yourself. It goes a long way to... Yeah.
All these vegetables are low in glycemic index, so that's, they're not going to cause, your blood sugar level to spike or anything like that. And like the carrots, and as Julia mentioned, like the red bell pepper, if you were to use that, those are naturally sweet. The snap peas are also naturally sweet. So very great to be able to throw all these different vegetables together. It's one of the reasons why I love stir fries so much.
Yeah, it's so versatile and it's really quick, you'll see. So I'm going to be adding this chicken back into this pan. The veggies have had just a couple of minutes to kind of start their cooking process. I want the chicken to finish, and I want any of those juices that had accumulated on the plate to go back in there as well. That's going to really help all of the veggies finish cooking. They need a little bit of that moisture to kind of steam up a little bit. This is just going to cook for maybe a couple of minutes. You can always put a lid on it if that will help it go faster. My chicken was just about 85% cooked when I set it aside, so it's just going to take a couple of minutes for it to finish. So I don't think that I need a lid per se, because in this time sure that you're eating a healthy meal, like safety-wise. Find the largest chunk of chicken that is in your dish, the fattest piece that you cut, and just cut that in half and make sure that it's cooked all the way through and not pink anymore through the middle. If your fattest piece is cooked, then you know all the smaller pieces are going to be done. So that's how you can just test to make sure once we get to that point. What I'm going to be doing is just making sure this is stirred up really well. It's looking like it's, oh, this is already looking really fresh and good. I'm getting that kind of tenderization happening on the veggies. I can tell because the asparagus is soft when I poke it. The broccoli is getting that kind of wet, steamed look. It's starting to cook down. So I'm probably at about 50% of where I want the veggies to be. So I'm going to be adding my sauce. Oh, no. I'm going to be cooking the sauce. Speaking out of turn. You want to bring your sauce up to a boil at this point, which won't take long. It's in a small pot and it's a small amount. Go ahead and give it a little stir just to make sure that any of that honey or sambal, those thicker, stickier properties, are not stuck to the bottom of the pan. Once that comes up to a rolling boil, when you've got some good bubbling action going on, we're going to be adding our cornstarch water mixture. I'll show you here. This is a slurry. This is a thickening agent in cooking. It's also used in kindergarten classes to do paper mache, I think. If I got this on my skin, I would break out into hives. I know that because we made Egyptian burial masks in 4th grade. Do we have any other questions in the meantime?
We did have a question. I answered it, but you probably have more details. They were wondering about washing or rinsing the chicken under hot water and patting it dry before prepping.
Yeah, I don't rinse the chicken. If you bought chicken that feels like it's got slime on it or anything like that would require rinsing, that you probably want to not buy that chicken. I just pat it dry really, really well to kind of remove any of the excess moisture, and I've made sure that it's thawed out safely in the fridge, not like quickly in the sink or anything like that. That's definitely a healthier way of doing it. And then I always pat it dry with some paper towels before I started. I did that before we came on air here today. And again, I just sort of, I clean the chicken by trimming off any of the excess fat or like little muscle skin or things like the tendons, stuff like that. But if it has, I've seen plenty of chicken like this in my career as a cook, chef. If it has that stuff where you think, I might want to rinse this off, then it might be past the point of you wanting to cook it.
So I was going to mention a little something with the cornstarch. It is a great way to thicken things. It does have about 7 grams of carbohydrate per tablespoon. So if you're not using a lot of it, like we're doing in this recipe, it's probably insignificant. But if you're using a lot of cornstarch and you're looking for other options, cassava I came across had less carbohydrate and lower glycemic index because it actually contains resistant starch. And then sorghum, which I've never used before, but apparently it does have some protein, some antioxidants, and dietary fiber. Yeah. And there was a study published that noted that there was some evidence to suggest that sorghum consumption may help to regulate blood sugar response and reduce oxidative stress. So that might be something to try. As far as flours go, they do have less carbohydrate. In fact, like whole wheat would be about half of that of cornstarch, but they don't have the thickening power that cornstarch does. So you probably have to use more of it anyway. But so various options.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. But yeah, sorghum is a really interesting, very interesting to work with. So on my sauce is at a boil. I've got a good bubbling action. So I want to add in my cornstarch slurry all at once. Make sure that I get all of it out of that bowl because I need all of it. You want to whisk it very quickly. You don't want to let it sit in there. It will turn into a dumpling. So you want to mix it in and stir, and you'll be able to tell, especially when it's on a high heat, it's going to thicken your sauce very quickly. Once it comes back up to a rolling boil, which shouldn't take another like 30 seconds to a minute, then you're good because you cooked off the flavor of the cornstarch and it's pretty thick. Like this looks like kind of a traditional store-bought teriyaki sauce, that glazy, thick consistency. The resistance that I get when I stir compared to earlier when it was just the soy sauce and water, it's at least twice, if not 2.5 times thicker. So I'm done. I'm going to turn that heat off on the sauce on the back. That's where I want that.
So Julia, I have a question actually, because a lot of times when I make stir fry, I just put the sauce in, I don't cook it in a separate container. What's the advantage of cooking your sauce separately?
If you were just going to be using the sauce without the cornstarch mixture, then it can go right into the veggies and cook it in and like absorb into the stir fry and kind of reduce itself into the stir fry. But then you're just making like a basic, if that's a traditional stir fry where the liquid kind of cooks out and you've got a more watery mixture. We're going for kind of a teriyaki sauce here, and to mimic that store-bought like yummy Chinese food takeout teriyaki flavor, you want that kind of thickened cornstarch mixture, and you can't do that in the pot with the veggies. You have to do that in a separate little situation so that the cornstarch can mix in really fast and really well. If we did that in here, the cornstarch would just coat the veggies and it would turn into like dumpling flour and it would never mix into the sauce.
Great. Now I know how to get a thick sauce.
Yeah, really good question. Really, really good question. And I like that you mentioned that flour is another really good thickening agent, and using one of the healthier flours is a really good way to go. You can make a roux. That's how we thicken sauces, by using regular flour, but then you're adding a different fat content because your roux has to be, instead of cornstarch, which mixes with water, flour usually mixes with fat, like an oil, and that's how you can thicken using flour. So you're kind of trading one thing off for the other, but yeah, it really depends on how much you're going to be using and how much of one type of ingredient your body wants. So our sauce is thick and flavored and everything is in here. I've got my stir fry on a low heat now. This is turned all the way down to low because I've got some good caramelization on my veggies already. And at this point, I don't want to burn the sauce or anything. I just want it to get mixed up and finished off. Just in time here, we're going to pour this in, and then this is going to be it. Be able to set this on a plate so you can all see it and garnish it. So if any of the last questions come in, we've got about 6-7 minutes left. Look at that. Now, we paused a few times to talk and answer questions and point out some things. So if you were to just start to finish, make this dish at home, would probably take about 45 minutes tops. And you've got a really healthy dinner, and then look at how much food I've got. That is definitely my meal for the week. And actually, I tend to donate food from classes, which is awesome. So everybody's helping everybody. I'm going to move this back. I know, my high-tech camera crew in action.
One thing to point out, and because I do this a lot, I make this mistake a lot, is to realize that if you do want to have this with brown rice, it takes a long time to cook brown rice. So generally, you probably want to, and Julia, correct me if I'm wrong, start the rice first, and then start to make the stir fry. Instead of what I often do is I get halfway through the stir fry and I remember, oh yeah, I need to make the rice. And then it sets me back a little while.
Really, really, really excellent point. Yes. If you are making your brown rice from scratch, that is one of the slowest cooking of the grains. It takes a good 40 minutes sometimes. So make sure that you start that first. There are also some really wonderful products out there. I'm a little bit of a snob of a chef, but not so much that I would tell you not to buy things that are convenient for you. They have brown rice that has been parboiled. That literally just means that it was par cooked and then flash packaged, and it takes half the time. There's usually nothing really like that much different about the nutritional value. Amy might have better information about that, but all it is usually it's been partially cooked. So that's what parboiled means, partially boiled. And then there are some that are like the instant variety. You can also get those Trader Joe's, or some stores have the little frozen bags that they're already cooked. You can microwave them in 3 minutes.
I always keep those in my freezer for exactly this reason.
Yes.
Like, oh, darn, I forgot to start the brown rice. Oh, I can cook it in 3 minutes if I just
Yes.
pull it out of the freezer.
Exactly. And it's still really good for you, brown rice. So there's a lot of different ways that you can have really healthy food in your life, but if all you have is regular raw brown rice, oh, look at that. That looks fantastic. I'm so happy. Good job. That's beautiful. All right, I'm going to plate this up so everybody can see.
Yeah, please.
Wow.
Yeah, that looks so good. If anybody else made any, please share. If you don't feel like sharing now, or if you plan on cooking this later, I would really love to see pictures. I'm like a proud mother hen sometimes about that. So you can send me pictures via the email or on our UCLA Teaching Kitchen Instagram page. I always get really, really proud when I get to see everybody's hard work. But here we go. We have a lovely dish of chicken stir fry. I am going to garnish with those scallions that we chopped up earlier so that I get that extra nutrition and flavor and color. And then I have my last little lesson for today. I have my sesame seeds here in a little pouch. I don't know if everybody has seen these before at the supermarket. There's usually a section at the end of one of the aisles where it's separate from all the other spices, and they sell these sort of maybe a little bit more Latino packaged spices. This is, funnily enough, Julia's brand spices, but there's other brands. There's El Guapo, there's like King brand, there's other brands, it doesn't matter. But this bag of sesame seeds, which I don't use every single day, I don't use sesame seeds every day. So this bag cost me 99 cents. If I were to go to the regular spice section and get a jar of sesame seeds, it would probably be about $3.99. And I don't need that much sesame seeds because I don't use it every day. If it's something that you use every single day, maybe chia in your smoothies in the morning, then you're going to spend less by buying it in bulk. Yes. But a giant jar of cinnamon is actually going to go bad. Like, it's going to lose flavor and lose value in your cupboard. So get a 99-cent packet of cinnamon if you don't think you're going to be using it a lot. It's a lot cheaper, and it's the exact same spice. So there's a little shopping hack. These little bags of spices are just a far better value in terms of price point, especially if it's something that you know you're not going to use a lot of. So I bought like a little Amazon set of little glass jars for my spices, and I just put them in there, and then I spend a lot less money in the long run on things that I know I'm not going to use up. So, oh, I've got a spill, so I'm gonna go sesame seeds all over the top.
And I think it's great to be able to find affordable spices, because I think so many times when you look at recipes, that can be a stumbling block for people. Like, they look through and it requires a bunch of spices and they say, oh, I don't have those, or that would cost me so much money.
Right.
But if you can find them inexpensive and keep them, then when you look up a recipe, it may have a lot of ingredients, but most of them you already have on hand. So it seems less intimidating.
Exactly. And then, yeah, buying that little pouch, you're like, okay, this is a lot less of a commitment. I might only use this one time for this one recipe, but it's only, sometimes those spice packets, I got allspice for 69 cents. Just there's a fun little lesson. So our beautiful sesame and scallion garnish, chicken and veggie teriyaki stir fry, ready to go. Just on time. I hope you guys had a lot of fun. If there are any questions, we won't run off right at this very exact moment. You can type in a couple of last questions if there are any. I don't want to run you off. If you think of anything later on while you make this, you can definitely reach out via email. You can absolutely reach out on Instagram as well. And like I said, I would love to see more pictures of your food. Even if it's not.
There will be pictures posted also. So someone was saying they can't really see it, but there will be pictures posted.
Yes. I know that's kind of difficult. I am getting a new webcam, I think, to make this better, but follow us at UCLA Teaching Kitchen on Instagram, and I will almost immediately when we're done here post a lovely shot so you can see what it looks like up close and all of that beautifulness, because I wish you could smell it. That's really the key here. It's beautiful, and that makes me want to eat it, but it tastes so good and it smells fantastic. All of these vegetables, I can't wait to eat them. I know that I'm going to feel a lot better through the day. So yeah, I hope you guys all had a lot of fun. I hope you try this recipe, and I hope you learned something. Amy, thank you so much. That was so much information. I always learned so much from you.
My pleasure. You know, someone is asking about what the cost about to make this.
And were you?
No, that's a really good question. I can kind of break it down. You could definitely leave out, like, the asparagus is not necessarily one of the cheaper vegetables, depending on if it's on sale at the market, things like that. You can also cut costs by buying like a bag of stir-fry veggies from the freezer section. That is perfectly acceptable substitution in this method because it's all kind of ready to go in one meal. Just try not to use the little pouches of sauce that come with them because those are extremely high in sugar and sodium and things that we don't want to put into our sauce when we make it from scratch. So that's a really good trick, but let me think. The broccoli, one head of broccoli, that was about 50 carrots, snap peas. The chicken I got on sale, which is a bonus. You can always look for frozen chicken breast or look for a cut that is cheaper than a whole breast. Sometimes they put the tenders on sale, and it doesn't matter if you use a tender because you're going to be chopping it up anyway. So always check for what is on sale. Sometimes the skin on chicken breast is a lot cheaper. Just rip that skin off and throw it away. And then you have a good chicken breast. So that can vary the cost and bring the budget down a lot. I would say that one serving of this, if we left out the asparagus because that is kind of a pricey vegetable add-in, this recipe serving 4 to 6 people would be the receipt was, I'm going to say about $24 because everything that I shopped for this week, including other workshops and other recipes, was only about 36 bucks. The chicken was the pricier, the asparagus was kind of the pricier. I had a lot of the sauce ingredients already just because they're pantry staples. If you buy all of the things fresh, if you didn't have sesame oil, if you didn't have soy sauce, yeah, I'd say maybe 25 bucks to make this entire thing for 6 people. But one serving, if you have a lot of the staples, you're looking at like under $3 for a serving of food.
One way I think too, meat tends to be more expensive, the most expensive item that I buy often. And so you can kind of stretch it, right? So you can use less meat and more veggies. And that's one way to reduce the cost.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when it comes to protein, if you eat all different kinds of protein, if you don't have limitations on what you eat in terms of what type of animal it comes from, then look for those price discounts. Sometimes the shrimp is on sale. Sometimes the chicken is on sale. You kind of like,
you buy them all and you can use some of it and freeze some of it for later.
Yes, that is almost always going to save you money when you're buying chicken, especially if you buy that 6-pack of breasts versus the 2-pack, you're going to save money. There's different varieties. You can get different cuts, like I said, in the freezer, and so that you can keep it in the freezer and just pull out one chicken cutlet when you want to make a quick stir fry instead of having to deal with a whole big batch. You can definitely reduce this down to one serving and just make a quick batch. It does last all mixed together in your fridge in Tupperwares for a good 4 to 5 days. If you had the veggies all cut up and prepped, they would last even longer in your fridge and you can use them for different purposes, which is also really nice to have. And
one of the reasons too that I don't like to overcook the vegetables the first time around, if you're going to reheat them, they're a little bit crisp. You know, when you put them in the fridge, if you're going to be reheating them throughout the week, that's one way to keep them from becoming too mushy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's going to prolong them throughout the week a lot more. When you do, that's also one of the things about cooking the sauce in the stir fry, Amy, is you are going to sog out your veggies even more. And so then you're reducing the length of time it's going to be delicious throughout the week.
Makes sense.
Stirring
we
in.
Also have a question about canola versus olive oil. And I think we kind of covered this. Either one would be fine. It's just a little bit different in flavor.
Yeah, a little bit different. Not that much, depending on how you're going to end up cooking it, especially when you're adding a really flavorful sauce. The oil that you use isn't really going to make a much of a flavor difference. But if you're just, let's say, roasting your vegetables and you're coating them in a little bit of spice and an oil, then that flavor of olive oil actually makes a difference in the way that the vegetables end up tasting. Which, by the way, I highly recommend. If you're roasting your vegetables, make a mix, a blend of canola oil and extra virgin olive oil, like a 50-50 blend. That way I mean, olive oil has a pretty good high heat point anyway, but you're extending the heat point with a little bit of that canola, and you're extending the money value. Olive oil, a big bottle of it costs about between $15 and $20, and a big bottle of canola oil costs between $3 and $5. So by splitting it in half, you get the flavor of the olive oil, but half the price. You're stretching your money a lot if you do it that way. I also just really like the way that it roasts together. That 50-50 blend is a really great way to roast veggies. That's what I use for anything that goes into the oven in my kitchen. And then, yeah, when it comes to sauteing, I just kind of decide what oil I'm going to use based on how I want the finished product to taste or not taste. That's a good question, though.
There's also a question on substitutions. So pointers, when you don't maybe have an ingredient that a recipe calls for on hand.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think that there's necessarily one website that has the entire library of possible substitutions, because it depends on what you're doing. If you're baking, there are a couple of really good sources. Honestly, going to the companies that like make the alternative ingredients, like I know Bob's Mills makes an amazing cup for cup replacement of gluten-free flour. So their gluten-free baking recipes that they advertise and that they talk about, and like the science that they talk about on their website, is really helpful. So sometimes some of those more I know kind of corporate websites that make the products that you're using, they have some helpful tips. And then a lot of the just classic, like old wives substitutions that have been learned and passed down for centuries, they're just kind of out there. You know, I honestly go to Dr. Google for most of those if I don't know the answer myself. Like I recently needed to refresh my memory what the exact ratio to make your own buttermilk at home is, and I started typing in how to make I got that far and Google finished it for me. Lots of people are searching for how to make buttermilk at home. So there's a lot of different options of just Googling, but then when you Google, finding the right website to trust is where to go. If you recognize the name, if it's a publication that you have read from before, New York Times, the America's Test Kitchen, Cooks Illustrated, Bon Appetit Magazine, Epicurious, anything that's been around for a good amount of time, trustworthy online resource. If it's an article that has a lot of comments that say, this is garbage, you know, I tried this and nothing worked, then don't trust it. If it's like a little recipe or a ratio or a little kitchen tip and it's got, like the New York Times food section, many of their recipes have been used and reviewed hundreds, if not thousands of times. If those maintain a high rating of between 4.5 and 5 stars, use that recipe. It's going to work. It's going to be amazing. If you find a recipe or some sort of tip online and there's one review and it's got 5 stars, that is the person that wrote the recipe or the article, and they're just trying to boost their numbers. Yeah, and no blaming to them. That's how you work the internet. That's how you do it. But the more reviews and the higher the numbers, the more reliable it's going to be. And that's even just in terms of a blog post or a kitchen tip or an article. Look at the comment section, look at the things that people are saying about it. If most of the comments are like, this is amazing, thank you so much, then I recommend that hack will probably work for you. But honestly, it's just kind of about typing in, like, I don't have buttermilk. I couldn't find it for weeks. So making my own or using Greek yogurt as an alternative. Those are all resources that are available online. Not necessarily, though, at one website, unfortunately. It's not really condensed in one place, although there are a few websites that have more science than others. Alton Brown, who's a famous chef from Food Network, he's actually I trust him more for his analytics than I do for his food. The way that he analyzes and researches and tests things, excellent in terms of like knife safety and things like how to boil an egg perfectly. He's good on the science. His food is less creative, you know, and then that's okay. That's what you go for other chefs for. So there's a lot of different, there's so many different resources, and I really recommend just finding the ones with the most number of reviews that then maintain the highest number of stars.
I do that a lot for herbs. I type in like substitute for fennel, right? Or substitute for allspice. And then sometimes I make my own spice. Like I might not have the combined spice, like 5 spice, you know, but I have the separate ones. I can put it together, or I can substitute different spice. And usually it's pretty easy to find that information online. And also, yeah, as you were mentioning, I think reviews can be so helpful. And a lot of times that'll indicate, you know, what recipes, if you're like me, kind of a recipe follower, not like naturally creative. I like to go for the highly reviewed, high starred recipes. And then sometimes within the reviews, people will point out substitutions that they made. Like, I didn't have this, so I left it out, or I put in something different.
Every time you will find that in the comments. People love to share how they changed a recipe, or I've published recipes online, and some of the comments that I get back sometimes are like, "This was amazing. I loved it so much. I changed this, 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 and this." I'm like, okay, I'm glad you loved it, except you clearly didn't. So it's not, but that's not the point. It's not hurtful. Cooking for yourself is the point. Make it work for you. Make it work with what you have. But there are always going to be comments down below. My daughter's gluten-free. I changed this to use a different flour and it worked wonderfully. Then you know it's going to work for you. You find those kinds of helpful comments all the time. So hopefully that helps you in your online search. I know the internet is full of wonderful and also terrible information. I don't know if this person is still here, but I would love to talk about the teaching kitchen. My 16-year-old daughter made oh, cool. I'm happy that we had some younger cooks in the kitchen today. Just as a quick aside, the UCLA Teaching Kitchen was started in many, many years ago, but finally officially opened over the fall. We teach courses for health professional students, staff and faculty groups, student groups. We teach classes about wellness, nutrition, general cooking knowledge. There aren't really structured programs yet. We were getting everything figured out right when campus had to get closed down. But lots of different resources that the Teaching Kitchen provides, and those are only going to keep growing in the future. So just keep following and checking us out. Once we get back to campus, we're going to have a lot more fun plans and curriculum involved. But it's through the recreation department and is not like an accredited class program as of this point on campus. So if she actually has aspirations to become a real pastry chef, then I say get a job right now. 16 years old is the time. And if you want to work in a kitchen, the younger you are, then start right now. You're going to get the best experience. You're going to get mentors when you're young and fresh and passionate. People want to teach you things. By the time you get to my old and gray age of late 30s, let's say, people don't want to mentor you. You have to, you need to figure it out for yourself. So starting young, starting fresh, starting excited is a really great way to start. Getting a summer job, just working in the back of a bakery or a pastry shop, that is the absolute 100% best way to find out if it is actually something that you want to do with your life, because it's brutal. I've been doing this for 16 years and I've been on my feet most of the time. And if you can't deadlift 100 pounds, you usually don't get hired. There's no union. There's no like extra retirement package. There is just a pure love for food and for feeding people. And so if you have that, then I encourage you so much to just get a job and try it out. And then you'll figure out if you really do have that. Because most people that I know that went to culinary school with really believed they wanted to be a chef, and then about a year or less into working in the industry, they're all gone. There's only 3 of us left from my graduating class that are still full-time working in the kitchen. Yeah, it's hard, but gosh, it's really wonderful, and it makes me very emotional. Being able to share cooking and food with people is the most incredible thing. So I encourage you wholeheartedly, but I also am not going to lie to you and tell you that it's like a bag of cherries all the time. So just start and work at it and learn what you can over a short amount of time, and then just keep going after that. And pastry, if you do decide you really, really, really love it after working for a little while and learning from a couple people, then I highly recommend a school program. You can be a cook. You can learn to be a chef by working your way up, years and practice and experience and mentoring. Becoming a really masterful pastry chef, I recommend the rigor of school, because you get that time to focus, that quiet time to really learn something. If you're working a job, you kind of learn on the go, and that's great, but it's not as meticulous, it's not as pristine, it's not as like fine art as you might want it to be. So there's work first, figure out if it's really the love of your life, because if it's not the love of your life, then run away now. But if it is the love of your life, then go to a pastry program, even if it's a short pastry program, but I do recommend school for that. And then just enjoy, just, oh my God, have so much fun and bake to your heart's content. I started.
That's such great advice, though, really. I mean, for our kids, because I have kids too. And just to really encourage them to get out there and talk to people doing it.
Yeah.
Do it yourself, get your hands dirty, see if you are interested before you spend 4 years pursuing a degree that you wish you didn't have. So super great advice.
Yeah, I hope that helps. And if the Teaching Kitchen can help along the way, we're available on social media. We have lots of virtual programming on our website, which if you can sign in with a UCID, hopefully you can. If not, we record them and then make them available on YouTube. So you can always go back and like watch some of our baking classes and start making some more fun stuff at home. That's really my first recommendation. I started off a little bit late. I dropped out of college, I was working, and it took me a while to figure out that turning the love of my life into a job was actually even possible. And then I went to culinary school to kind of climb that ladder a little bit faster. But that was because I was already 24 when I first like really got that ball rolling. So at 16, now's your chance. Like just start working. That was I missed that opportunity to get my foot in the door before school, and to. Because I could have just climbed my way up and skipped the debt, probably. But yeah, for pastry specifically, school is never a bad idea, because it's such a science and it's such an art form. So the more practice and the more focused practice you have, I really recommend that. But don't go off and register for culinary school and then find out a month in that you are miserable and this is not actually your true calling. Figure that out now. That's what I would say. I hope that helps. And the Teaching Kitchen is a resource, but it's more for like, classes, not a whole culinary program, not at this point. Hopefully that answered that question. That's such an awesome question. I'm so glad that you were here and took part in this workshop. And check out our website and our Instagram page for any of the other helpful resources and information. And you can definitely find a way to get in contact with me through Instagram or through that website. So if you need anything, I'm here for everybody. Okay, I am going to stop recording and I am going to say farewell now. Thank you all for being here. This was really wonderful. Thank you, Amy.
See you tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, I'm really excited.
Bye.
Bye.